Lexigo presents The Native Experience with your host, Brian.
Yes, it's here. Hello, world. I am so excited. This is Brian from Lexigo.com, and you are listening to the very first episode of the Native Experience podcast, the show that just launched. By the way, the show also wants you to subscribe so that you don't miss any episodes. That's what it told me anyway. In all seriousness, this is the podcast that goes beyond translation and localization and discusses creating truly native experiences for diverse audiences. We are so excited. This is our very first episode of the Native Experience podcast, and today I get the honor of talking with three people from Lexigo. We're going to talk all about what the Native Experience is, what you can expect from this podcast, and why we even started this podcast in the first place. What's in it for you? What's your takeaway? There's a story. We're going to talk about it. We're going to tell you all that. And we're also going to get to know Lexigo as a company. We will introduce, well, all of us for that matter. We've got 4 people in the studio today. It's going to be a lot of fun. I'll share a little bit of my background, and the other 3 will be sharing their backgrounds. So I'm excited to get right into this. Let's see where this conversation goes. It's going to be a lot of fun, but I hope you get a lot out of this episode. And make sure to hit subscribe because we have a lot of wonderful guests coming to this show right away, actually. We're launching with 4 episodes, and we're going weekly, so I'm excited. But let's get into this. It's officially here, the very first episode of the Native Experience. So Mark, Tony, Zaina, welcome. Thank you, guys. Appreciate you being here.
Thanks for having us.
If you're listening to this show for the very first time, you're wondering, what is this show about? What's in it for me? So we're going to talk about that in a minute. We've got some stories to share, but we want to hear about you 3 to hear who you are and what your involvement is with this show and with Lexigo and all that. So who wants to go first? What are you thinking, Tony? How about Tony? Why don't you go first?
You want me to go first?
Okay,
sure.
Yeah, tell me about yourself, what you do, what do you do for fun, what do you nerd out on, all that good stuff.
I'm the head of strategy here at Lexigo. My job involves helping out the CEO with brand direction and vision and all that fun stuff, but also working with clients directly, helping them with their own strategic directions in relation to translation and multicultural marketing, which is our specialty. So I've been in the industry for over 25 years. Bit of a veteran.
Nice.
Some might call me a dinosaur. Maybe not in that sort of T-Rex kind of way, more in that sort of obscure ornithomimus kind of way. My interests and passions are really in supporting people from culturally and linguistically diverse backgrounds to develop confidence and opening up opportunities for representation for people from different backgrounds.
So are you nerding out on anything specifically right now, though? I mean, currently this week?
Yeah, I'm actually about to go on holidays. I'm really obsessed with Star Wars. So we've booked a suite at the Galactic Star Cruiser, which is the hotel that they built for Star Wars, which I understand is closing in September. So we may be the very last ones to actually go ahead and book that. So yeah,
oh my gosh,
looking forward to going to a galaxy far, far away.
That's awesome. You know, I hate that they keep closing things like this. I went to I was at a conference in Las Vegas, and the Star Trek Experience was there, and I thought, well, I got to go see this. And it was closed, or they had just shut it down. So I never really got to see it, but I got to see the Enterprise bridge they did for the Enterprise D from the Star Trek The Next Generation. Torn down, we got to see some of the stuff, which was at least kind of cool, but they keep tearing this stuff down. So Star Wars is next, man. They're getting rid of it all. I'm sorry.
Look, I'll have my fair share of merchandise, and I'm participating in a lightsaber making workshop. I'll have my little tokens.
I was just going to say, I expect you to come back with a lightsaber. So one of these days when we meet up in person, we can then duel, which would be fun.
Awesome.
Zaina, I'm just going to go down this list because you're next on my screen here. So welcome. Okay. Tell us about yourself. What do you do? What do you do for fun? All that good stuff.
I'm the content marketing manager at Lexigo. I'm new, actually. I've only been in Australia like 6 months. I'm Canadian. I have a background in marketing. I've been in marketing for 10 years. I've worked in Canada. I worked in Dubai for most of that time as well. And Dubai is a very multicultural place.
Yeah.
I would say maybe most of the population is actually made up of expats. Yeah. So it's a very diverse place to live. So it's funny, like coming into Australia where they put such emphasis on, well, I'm noticing a lot of emphasis on multicultural marketing here versus in Dubai. And it's interesting to see it as an outsider just because all the marketing in Dubai is multicultural because everyone is from somewhere different. So you always have to take that into consideration. Yeah. So it's interesting to be in a country where it has to be seen as a separate activity to marketing. So I'm kind of getting used to the lay of the land here. What I do for fun, I'm very much into like the spirituality thing and the wellness. And I don't know if you've heard of human design and things like that. So that's kind of what I do for fun.
Nice. Well, that sounds like fun. I mean, not to mention it's good for your body and your mind and spirit. So that's a bonus. Like we talk about self-care all the time. Mark and I have had conversations about that, and there you go.
Yeah.
Nice job.
Yeah. Thanks.
Well, thanks for joining us here, and welcome to Lexigo then, if you're relatively new on that, but not new to the industry, which is awesome. Mark.
Thank you.
All right. Tell us about yourself, Mark, what you do for fun and all that.
I'm the founder and CEO of Lexigo. A lot of my time is spent on Lexigo. It's my passion. We started about 11 or 12 years ago now, and we started off as a technology-based translation company. Still involve humans in the process, but we rely heavily on technology to automate a lot of the project management and also to allow our translators to translate faster and more accurately. As Tony mentioned, we also do a lot of multicultural marketing. And that was sort of the idea behind the podcast. So a lot of in our industry, the terms foreign marketing and ethnic marketing are used a lot, which I think is a little bit incorrect, because what's foreign and ethnic to you is actually native to someone else.
True.
That's the point of this show, to really share experiences where either our clients or people have been through localization processes where they've really provided an authentic and native experience to their target audiences. In terms of fun, a little bit like most people, we're just playing around with AI a lot. Massive Star Wars and Star Trek fan. Nice. Like Tony and you. Yeah, Star Trek. Actually, there's a little fun fact with Lexigo. We've got all our tech products actually named after Star Trek products.
Really?
So, yeah, that's right. Yeah,
I have to go look now. That's awesome.
Yeah, so our core is called Lexigo Core. We have Helm, Scan,
nice,
and they're all little bits and pieces of Star Trek.
That's cool.
When are we going to get our replicator, Mark? That's what I want to know.
Yeah, that's what we're working on. That's in Lexigo Labs. We're working on that now. And maybe a C3PO.
Oh, that'd be cool. There you go. So you do, I didn't know you nerded out on that stuff. That's awesome.
Yeah, I love it. Next Gen is definitely my go-to. So if anyone's listening and get started with Star Trek, I think Star Trek Next Gen is the best one.
Okay, I'm going to throw this one out. Have you watched season 3 of Picard yet?
No, I haven't.
Okay.
What'd you think of it?
I'm not going to say anything spoilery, but I'm just going to say it's some of the best Star Trek I've ever seen.
Oh, awesome.
So if you've not seen seasons 1 and 2, just skip to 3 and go back to 1 and 2 later, maybe.
Yeah.
It was that good. So I have to ask, Zaina, are you into the nerdy stuff at all? Or is this totally foreign to you?
It's a little foreign to me. Yeah.
This is what keeps the variety alive, though. That's okay. No, that's what I wanted to ask.
I'm learning.
Well, it's okay. So my wife is not into this kind of stuff either. And so we chat about this, and she's just like, what you just said made zero sense and was like literally a foreign language. So I'm like, well, all right. It's fun. Keeps us on our toes.
Yeah, it keeps things interesting.
That's right.
So Brian, you're the producer and host for The Native Experience. Can you tell us and tell the audience a little bit more about you and your background?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, going off of the slightly nerdy side of things, I do enjoy nerdy things, nerdy and geeky things. But I don't know if I'd consider myself a full-on nerd or geek, because I'm what I call a multi-passionate. I've got way too many interests, and it's kind of like, what else can I get excited about or be curious about or learn about? Or, I've been behind the microphone for most of my life. I grew up with this passion to be a morning show disc jockey. And then as soon as I was able to get into radio was starting to die, and they were getting rid of all the local hosts, and was in radio, I think, for 2 years. It was like, well, I better go find something else to do. And I've done business. I've done all kinds of other things, but getting into the radio side has just had an opportunity to get into podcasting, which was exciting once the technology came around for that. Started doing that. And I've been doing podcasting now for, I'm trying to think how long now, about 13 years, I want to say. I've done podcasts all over the place. I've done podcasts for various clients. I've done podcasts, all kinds of different topics, interviewed people from all over the world. I mean, it's been an honestly, podcasting for me has been such an world opening experience, because, you either have somebody travel to where you're at or you travel to where they're at in order to really converse. But nowadays you get on a podcast and you talk to people all over the world, and it just feels like it's so small. So it's amazing how this technology has really opened up the world in so many amazing ways. But yeah, to the multi-passion, I'm also a musician. I play the piano. I've been doing that most of my life as well. Love performing, love doing that kind of stuff. But yeah, too many interests to list here. I won't even try, because somebody says, what are your hobbies? And I'm like, I've got about 200 on the current list right now. So there you go.
Great. And yeah, you made a good point about the world's so much smaller now. And I think through our podcast, you'll see most of our guests are all over the world, not just in Australia, the US, Europe. So we've got a massive, diverse range of guests. It's
incredible. Conversations that I've had, it's amazing how interesting the perspectives are from people from different countries. And it's the kind of thing that I think we all need to hear all the time. It opens our minds up. It challenges us. It encourages us. It's incredible. So I'm really, really excited to see where this podcast goes, because I know that there's going to be these nuggets that are going to be shared, and it's just going to be, whoa, this is good. Take this, learn it, apply it. It's amazing. So let's get into that. Let's talk about the podcast in general. I know people are going to ask, what's in it for me? What's the takeaway? What is this podcast really about? What's the passion behind this podcast? Why was it even created in the first place? Which I know you touched on, Mark. So talk about those things. And, Mark, I know you're going to definitely share, but I would love to hear your perspectives, Tony and Zaina as well.
The main goal is not just to educate or allow people to learn more about how other organizations have gone to market, making sure that any content created or campaigns that were made are very authentic to the different audiences and in language. But also we want to have some guests on the show who can provide a different perspective, maybe from their own culture or some customs and things that they conduct that maybe the audience wants to learn about, and just give more insight into their own cultures.
Yeah.
Over the course of the show and all the episodes, we've just got a nice bank of different cultural experiences that people can learn from.
Yeah, I'm excited about some of the conversations and guests that are coming up too, because we've got some conversations where I know that there's some powerful personal stories from some of our guests' backgrounds. That in and of itself is just amazing content that you can learn from to provide a native experience, whether it's a personal or a professional standpoint as well. So
yeah, so everyone's view of what the word native means. In our industry, it's contextualized. We're comfortable using that word, especially because we're using translators who are native.
If I think about it, like my entire life, I've been really fascinated with language, being a third culture person coming into a predominantly English-speaking country. Language has always been fascinating to me. Like I love ancient languages. I love the context and nuances of modern language. But so the choice of language often I think is a very important consideration in the act of translation and in marketing. The word native obviously has some context when it comes to Indigenous and First Nations cultures here in Australia. When it's used in the context of translation and aligned with this concept of mother tongue, native can sometimes be interpreted in a different way. And it has special meaning here in Australia because of the rather, dare I say, dissonant relationship that we have with First Nations people in Australia. So I do think that it is coded with nuances that are specific to the Australian political landscape that make it a bit of a challenge to use as a bit of a platform for Lexico's own brand values and brand development. At the end of the day, I always say to my students when it comes to branding, a brand is an empty vessel which you fill with meaning. So Lexico is this empty vessel. We're filling this with meaning, and perhaps it is about repurposing this idea of what it means to be native.
There's also a big difference between, or a distinction between Indigenous and native. Yeah, with First Nations, I would refer to them more as an Indigenous. There's a big difference, I think, between native and Indigenous.
There is a difference between the words.
Yeah. And I think they get confused a lot, the two words. They're sort of used in the same meaning, but they're actually not the same meaning.
We have to agree on language most of the time.
Yeah.
We have to agree on the certain words that we use in order for us to start the communication. And if you don't have that, you can't open that communication.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Brian, I know, for Indigenous Americans, in the US, you actually use the term native, not Indigenous.
No, actually, I like what you said, Tony, about we got to agree on the language, because that's not happening here in the US, because, originally they were called Indians, and then it was like, well, no, that they're not Indians because they're not from India. So then it was they're Native Americans. And then no, native is not an okay word to use either. It's actually indigenous peoples. So indigenous is now the correct term here in the US for the people who are from, like their families literally came from the actual United States land, versus like a native experience that we're talking about could be, okay, well, I was born in the United States, but my ancestors didn't come from here, so I'm not indigenous. But it's honestly getting confusing because you're right. We're not agreeing on language, and we're changing things so much that that's what's appropriate right now, but it may not be later. So I'm not sure.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, in the Australian context, indigenous means very localized. There's over 150 Aboriginal cultures and countries here in Australia. So indigenous means native to that particular country.
Okay.
So where I'm from, I'm in Wurundjeri land at the moment, the Eastern Kulin Nation, and that represents people who come from that land, known as indigenous. And we have this thing called a welcome to country in Australia as well. So welcome to country can only really be delivered by somebody who is of First Nations. And in particular, welcome to country is from people who are indigenous to the country in which you're being welcomed to. Everything else is an acknowledgement of country because they're not necessarily indigenous. So we use First Nations as an umbrella term.
Okay. First Nations. Okay, I like that.
First Nations.
Okay, so let's define this then, just so that we're on the same page for this podcast, the difference between indigenous and the native experience, like having a native experience.
What's native to an individual's environment? So you could be from a different cultural background within Australia, and you have your community and maybe your place of worship, and you've got different things that define you as a person and what's native to you and your experiences in the country. So it's not always aligned with the mainstream population or the mainstream experience of others. And that's what we really mean by having a native experience. So when they're being communicated to, they're getting content in their language and also within their context and their life and how they live. So that's really the idea behind it. Tony, do you think you could explain that better?
I think perhaps the differences between indigenous and native are quite nuanced. If we take the concept of native, somebody can be native to a particular region or native to a particular language or identify from a nationality perspective as being from a certain country, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they were born and raised and bred there. And perhaps there's nuances in the idea of being indigenous, understanding the nuances of languages, the nuances of jargon, certain in-jokes, certain understanding of locality and context that somebody who perhaps lived in an environment for a very long time but necessarily was born and raised there may have slight differences in that context and that understanding, those nuanced understandings and context. I suppose if we were going to make a distinction between indigenous and native, that's probably sort of what comes to mind the most. Indigenous literally means that they're born from that place, whereas native could be that they are residents of that particular place.
That does actually make a lot more sense. And honestly, tell me if I'm even on the right track here, but I'm even thinking from a native experience, it could be, well, Mark, you mentioned places of worship, so it could be their faith-based background. Thinking about here, you go state to state, and there's definitely different native experiences within each state, how you communicate, words that are used. There was a big video joke of if Californians moved to Texas, the experience. It was honestly a hilarious video series that I watched. But it was very interesting because you just look at how foreign it seems to go from just a state to state here in the US. And it's not just language, but it's everything that goes into it. So
yeah, I mean, you see it in even workplace cultures. For those who have created a business, they have an innate understanding about what that business is, how it operates, some of the vision, some of the historical context for decisions, as opposed to somebody who's been in the business for a very long time, may not have started in the business, but understands the nuances, knows all the tricks and tips and such, but doesn't necessarily have that innate understanding of the historical context and those decisions that have been made collectively over time. It's more of a historical understanding and a collective knowledge accrued from the very beginning.
Well, I know we're not necessarily doing this on the show per se, but even just what we were talking about at the very beginning, where Zaina, I was asking you, do you understand what we're talking about? And you're saying, not really, talking about the nerdy kind of things, the Star Trek and the Star Wars, that's a language of its own, honestly.
Yeah, no, that's true. And like I'm in a lot of those Facebook groups, for example. There's a group that I'm in that's all these travelers, and they speak a specific language, like they're talking about like rewards points and how they navigate the world of travel. And then there's another group that's like a business group, and they have all of these acronyms, and I'm new to business in Australia. It's specifically a business group in Australia, and I don't know half the acronyms that they use. So like Tony was saying, there's like pockets of native experiences wherever you go. Mm-hmm. Australia is an interesting one because I think like it's one of the countries, like I grew up in Canada, and Canada's very diverse as well. And I kind of always likened Canada to Australia. Just in my mind, I always thought that they would be very similar because they're both Commonwealth countries. They're very diverse populations. They have a, really good immigration policy. I knew a lot of people that had come to Australia instead of Canada and vice versa. So I always thought I would come to Australia and it would be very similar. And in some aspects it is, but in other aspects, like the communities the way that they operate here is very different from the way that they operate in Canada, where I feel like Canada, the diversity it flows really easily. And here I feel it's diverse, but it's pockets, like they're not really connected. So there really is like every single area, at least in Melbourne that I've been to, has a completely different energy, different people, different language, kind of like what you were saying about the States in the US. Mm-hmm. Here it's like, it's the suburbs and the neighborhoods. Oh, yeah. You go from one neighborhood too, and I didn't expect it to be so varied. Yeah. Everywhere you go is so different. Everyone's experiences is different, and it's shaped by where they grew up, what neighborhood they were living in, what school they went to, what university you went to. Mm-hmm. And all of these things are really what make up your native experience.
Another distinction between Indigenous and Native is there's a reverence associated with Indigenous people born off that land. We, as a multicultural society, a society that's built from colonialism and a society that's been imported to supplement the Indigenous population, mm-hmm. there's a specific type of reverence that's associated with Indigenous. And I think that when the concept of Native or being Native comes about, when it comes to the Lexigo experience, what we are aiming to do is making it the closest thing to being as localized as we can be. And that's that recognition of that aim to be as localized and as native as we can be, so that we can feel more like the communication is orientated towards authentic communications, open communications at that.
Love it.
It's interesting what you say about there being like a reverence for Indigenous people. I really like that. I just wanted to, it's Indigenous people across the board. Like, I think of Mark's Egyptian, and like the ancient Egyptians are that era and that time, and those people, they did so much. I also just recently watched a documentary about ancient Egypt, so it's like top of mind for me. Nice. Like with a lot of what they've done, and like each one of us is Indigenous to a specific country in a specific area, mm-hmm. even if we don't necessarily, even though that might not be our native experience, but we are all Indigenous to a specific country or region. Like being Indigenous does shape your experience and what your native experience is, because it's like the lens on top of which you see the world.
I think your perspective, Zaina, on your experiences being a newbie to the country and noticing that there are these pockets of communities, and these pockets of communities don't seem to be interacting with one another. I think I suspect that is a result of the way that the systemic migration policies have arisen in Australia. We had at some point a White Australia policy where there was a distinction that Australians should be from a European-centric background, and we weren't accepting of other people. So that xenophobia is somewhat built into the context of the fabric of our society. That's slowly eroding, but it's taken over 50 years for that to happen. And with more exposure to different cultural groups coming into the country, it stands to reason that there's still like generations of people who are still used to that sort of notion of being a little bit suspicious or uncomfortable or that's conditioned through the system that they grew up in. And so as a result of that, people are just feeling more familiar with being amongst people that look like them.
Yeah.
But true multiculturalism, I think, is the ambition, the goal, and it's been something that has been driven since the 70s here in Australia, but it's taking a long time to integrate into the fabric of society. And we're slowly making those changes happen, but still, this is why organisations like Lexigo still exist, because we've still got a long way to go when it comes to that, the interconnectedness, that intercultural communication that needs to exist in this society.
Yeah, it's true. People are...
Yeah.
We'll just use the word phobic in general, but and I just even see people phobic to do anything that's different from their norm. So, then you add into, oh, these people don't look like me or they don't talk like me. And so then they get even more phobic, or maybe not even afraid. Maybe they're just more of, okay, I don't know what to say or I'm not comfortable.
There's quite a mindset shift that needs to happen being in a marketing kind of capacity where you're responsible for communications. I mean, a lot of the brands and businesses out there are responsible for setting the agenda around communication, including the government and such. There's a responsibility to sort of think, when it comes to multicultural communication and engagement, to think multicultural first. There's a tendency in this industry for multicultural communication to come at the end. So something is written in English and then it's translated to different cultures in order to engage. And I think once that mentality starts to change, then we'll start to see true multiculturalism and interculturalism starting to happen in our society. But once again, that's a long way coming. It's a massive leap for a lot of organizations to change the way that they think about how they engage with communities.
I think we need to dive deeper into this. Maybe the four of us should get on and do another episode and, dive into this stuff more, because I think there can be a lot of good lessons learned, good conversation just around stories, personal stories and experiences as well. What you guys have seen as well. I think it'd be fun.
Yeah, I agree.
That's good.
Where can we go for more information? Mark, tell us a little bit more about how Lexigo is going to be a part of this, and let us know where we can go to contact you and get in touch, ask questions, all that good stuff.
Yeah, so in terms of the Native Experience podcast, if anyone's got any guest requests or would like to be on the show or wants to add questions or comments, just email us at nx@lexigo.com. For anything else, hi@lexigo.com.
Perfect. Awesome. Well, Mark, Zaina, Tony, thank you all for joining this conversation. I know we could have gone on for hours on this one, and I'm excited to revisit this because I know that there's a lot more to say here. But thank you all for being on. I'm excited for this podcast coming up.
Thank you, Brian.
May the force be with you.
And also with you.
This is the way.
This is the way, yes.
Live long and prosper.
My goodness, thank you so much for joining us here on the first episode of The Native Experience. We'd love to hear from you. nx@lexigo.com. Send us questions and comments there. And we've launched with 4 episodes, so make sure to subscribe to the podcast and go binge on the other 3 episodes. We have an episode for you every Tuesday morning, Australia time. Remember, always strive for authenticity and embrace the power of Native experiences.